Well, the headlines about tax avoidance began with the scandal at HSBC and its Swiss banking arm. And today, the ripples from that story extended still further when the Telegraph's chief political commentator very publicly resigned. Peter Oborne claimed he'd become increasingly concerned about the paper's news values, especially when it came to HSBC, a valued advertiser. The scandal, which made banner headlines in most newspapers, received, he says, scant coverage in the Telegraph. Tonight, the paper said they utterly refute the allegations and say the division between advertising and editorial operation has, quote, always been fundamental to our business. And they described Mr. Oborne's statement as astonishing and unfounded, full of inaccuracy and innuendo. Well, I've just been speaking to Mr. Oborne about his decision. Peter Oborne, you described a newspaper where there were waves of sackings, 6 editors in 11 years. Is it actually worse than other newspapers?
In that respect, I don't think it's necessarily so. I've worked for some pretty ropey outfits. I do think that the Telegraph has a great tradition. This is a point I continually was trying to make to Murdo McLennan. It has a very large circulation. It's still very profitable. And to go through these waves of sackings and generally a lowering of standards is unnecessary, and I think...
OK, well, let me just pick you up on one of those. For example, you describe a story about a woman with 3 breasts that was published in order to get online attention, despite being known to be false. Surely stories like that pop up all the time online.
This is the Daily Telegraph we're talking about, and I think that it's a tremendous inheritance, the Daily Telegraph. It's existed for more than 100 years. It's always been famous for the accuracy of its news coverage and the fairness of its comment.
Well, that takes us to the nub of the whole business, doesn't it? You say the Telegraph's recent coverage of HSBC amounts to a fraud on its reader. You're not just an old warhorse complaining that times have changed.
Look, I just had a look at last week's coverage of the HSBC and its Swiss operation. Basically, it was the first day one, it was ignored by the Daily Telegraph. Day 2, there were 6 paragraphs at the bottom left of page 2. Day 3, 7 pars lost in the business section, some deep in the business section. Now, meanwhile, the rest of the newspapers, the serious newspapers, even the unserious newspapers, are giving it really good, solid coverage, front page coverage. Now, and this is a pattern. It just wasn't just last week. It's been going on for more than 2 years, whereby nothing unfavourable of any substance has been written about HSBC.
Well, you say a banking correspondent did raise the whole issue of critical issues about HSBC being spiked. Surely that is an editorial decision, isn't it? You get an editor, he runs the paper.
This story, which was no legal... Harry Wilson was the name of the banking editor. And he wrote this story. It was no legal problems. It went up, and then somehow mysteriously it disappeared from the. And you can see it having disappeared also at the moment. Now, what lay behind that decision, and many decisions like it? I do think the Telegraph needs to explain to us why its coverage of HSBC has been skewed. And not just to us, actually, the really important people they need to explain this to is the readers of the Daily Telegraph. They're the people who trust the paper. Readers of the Daily Telegraph, I felt so proud to write for the Daily Telegraph. And
but are you a lone voice? Are you sort of the last of the old Telegraph simply complaining about the new?
Look, I've had so many conversations with Telegraph staff. I believe that I am speaking for the vast majority of Telegraph staff in saying that we have no confidence at all in Murdo McLennan, the chief executive. And I'd go further than that. I'd say we have no confidence at all in the Barclay brothers who own the paper.